My DeLorean needs an alignment. I did one back when I upgraded the suspension, and the shop got the front pretty well dialed in, but there wasn't much they could do about the rear. Normally, the only adjustment for the rear is the toe-in, which is done by changing the number of shims on the trailing arm. The shop had to remove all of the shims to get it even close to aligned. Nothing seems to be bent or otherwise damaged that would cause it to be off like that. It's just off. Many years ago, I installed some adjustable lower link arms. This is mostly for adjusting the camber, but because everything isn't exactly in the plane that it's meant to adjust, it will also affect the toe-in a bit. The shop found that they could get the correct toe-in, they just had to push the camber way out to around here. They refer to this as functional camber, although it would still cause uneven wear to the tires. And this really isn't the look I'm going for. The solution is to add adjustable upper link arms, which at this point is the only part of the suspension I haven't replaced yet. DeLorean Industries sells a nice set of stainless steel arms, which I then let sit in my workbench for a few months because of how much trouble I had removing the lower pivot bolts the last time I did anything like this. Today, I am finally installing those link arms. I only have to remove 2 bolts on each side, and I have everything I need, so this shouldn't take more than an hour or 2 total. So I'm thinking about 2 days. Passenger side first. The good news is the nut came right off, and I can actually turn the pivot bolt so it's not seized. The bad news is I need a cheater to turn it, so this isn't gonna be easy. I tried what worked last time with the lower pivot bolt. Hit it with a hammer. This is complicated by how the body of the car is right there, so I can't actually get enough of a swing to apply any real force to the bolt. An electric auto hammer seemed like it was worth a try. It's great because it works in tight spaces like this, but this is a basic model and it did nothing here. I thought about prying the bolt out, but I couldn't get a good perch on the head with the pry bar I have. At least the bolt in the frame came out. I'm not sure why this one is so much easier. Galvanic corrosion could have welded the steel bolt and the aluminum carrier together over time, but the bolt actually rides on steel sleeves that are pressed into the carrier. So that's not what this is. Well, hammering still doesn't work. I could lift the body off the frame, but that sounds like a lot of work. Maybe I should just go out and get a good impact wrench, see if I can break it free with that. Or I could just take the whole carrier out of the car. Yeah, let's do that. Removing the carrier means removing the nut on the lower pivot bolt, taking off the shock, unbolting the trailing arm, then pulling the pivot bolt out, and all 6 of the hex cap screws on the axle. That's a total of 11 bolts, not including the one I'm actually trying to get out. I took a few minutes to clean off the carrier, just so I wouldn't get grease and oil all over myself while I tried to figure this out. I'm not trying to make it pretty, just a little cleaner. Instead of going right to the hammer, I decided to try pressing the bolt out. This was a complete failure. I could not find a way to support the carrier such that the bottle jack would actually press straight down on the bolt. The flange on the bolt head means that there isn't a lot of room to get a socket on and actually push against the aluminum, and everything I tried to support the carrier just slipped out under the load. I tried heat next. The thing is, I'm a bit paranoid about damaging the carrier. This one isn't available anymore, and aluminum has a relatively low melting point. Thankfully, this is a big enough block of metal that it should pull the heat away without compromising the carrier itself. But the map torch doesn't seem like it's getting the bolt hot enough to actually matter. It's getting the ends hot, but I don't think much of the heat is actually making it down to where it's actually stuck. So I went back to dousing with penetrant again and hitting it with a hammer. Kinda wish I'd gotten that impact wrench now. Progress! Who needs an impact wrench? With the bolt flush of the carrier, I had to switch to hammering on another bolt to finish punching it out. But since I have to hold the bolt, the carrier is bouncing all over the place because I'm not holding it down anymore. I tried a C-clamp, but it didn't do much. I need more clamps, or straps, or a bigger vise, or something. Eventually, I did manage to shift it down just enough that I could put the drift bolt in the hole and go back to holding the carrier down while I hit it with a hammer. Hitting with a hammer is kind of a theme on this channel. Finally. It's been 3 hours now. This old bolt looks better than I expected. I'm still replacing it. This is the new link arm. Nice stainless steel construction, high quality welds with a turnbuckle in the middle. The old one was fine, just a little surface rust and a bit of flaking paint, and the bushings seem good, but it's not adjustable, so it's time to retire it. Now I just have to get all this back in the car. This wasn't too terrible. Most of the hardware is new from when I did the coilovers and the stainless steel trailing arm. The hub carrier is a little ungainly until you get the first couple bolts in, but it's not too bad. Then it's just a matter of mounting the axle, reinstalling the rotor, mounting the brakes, and putting on the wheel.
All right, done.
Now for the other side. Oh, and I forgot to tighten the turnbuckle. I caught this one before I lowered the car, but that could have been bad. Now for the driver's side. I was hoping I'd get lucky and the bolt would just come right out. No such luck. I couldn't even turn it with the cheater. It looked like the head might have been turning a little, but I think I was just twisting the bolt itself rather than turning the bolt inside the carrier. Since I didn't want to snap the head off, I went back to dousing it with penetrant, throwing some heat at it, and hitting it with a hammer. Not that any of that worked. I tried to put the nut back on so I could drive around on it for a bit. Maybe bouncing around on some rough roads might add to the heat and the penetrant and the hammering and actually break it free. But I couldn't get the nut on. It turns out that a brass hammer will keep the bolt from mushrooming out, but it won't protect the threads from glancing blows. That's the other reason you're supposed to hammer on a nut on the end of the bolt instead of directly on the bolt. At least the bolt in the frame came loose. I was a bit worried about this. It didn't turn easily at first, and it's threaded into a blind hole that is cut directly into the frame. The worst case scenario would have involved drilling it out, which would have sucked. Before giving up and taking off the entire carrier again, I gave my impact wrench a try. I did not expect very much. This is a very weak wrench. It's great for things like lug nuts. It has just the right amount of torque to take them off, but not so strong that it will over-tighten them when putting them back on. But here, it was useless. So I finally gave in and bought a much more powerful impact wrench. The old one advertises 220 foot-pounds of torque. This new wrench claims nearly 1,200 pounds, and it specifically refers to it as breakaway torque. Now, all that might be marketing, I'm not really sure. All that really matters is, can this actually turn the bolt? Well, damn. Now I wish I bought this earlier. Now even the short swings I can manage here are able to get the bolt flush with the carrier. Just like the other side, I had to switch to punching the pivot bolt out with another bolt once it was flush. This is a little tricky to get started because if you don't hit the bolt dead on, the force of the blow skitters across the surface of the carrier instead of into the pivot bolt and nothing moves. I got it eventually. I found that I had to periodically turn the bolt with the impact wrench or it would become stuck again. I think the wrench was heating up the bolt as it turned, and that would loosen it enough to hammer on it until it cooled down again. This wasn't a problem until I got the bolt about halfway through the link arm. There just isn't any more room to fit the impact wrench. So I still had to take the entire carrier off. It went faster this time, although the upper arm was kind of stuck against the frame even after I got the bolt out. But before I took everything apart, I tried turning it with a cheater one more time. Surely all that hammering and impact wrenching had loosened it a little, right? Maybe it was the tension from the link arm that was causing it to bind. Ah, it turned! Wait, the bolt isn't turning. The wrench is turning. Only the wrench is turning. I broke my wrench, and that's why you're supposed to use breakers for this kind of thing, not socket wrenches. All right, back to it. I skipped the press and went right to the bench. I spun the bolt with the impact wrench, gave it a few good blows with the hammer, and popped right out. Everything on this side went back together easily enough. I'm a little concerned about how hard it was to get the last inch of the upper pivot bolt back through the carrier. I probably should have cleaned the inside of those horns a little better. It'll still be easier to take this off next time, what with all the anti-seize I'm using. I really just hope there isn't a next time. Back at the alignment shop, they were able to use the new link arms to correctly set the rear alignment. I didn't notice much of a difference when driving until I hit some heavy rain. See, over the last few months, I noticed this weird shifting feeling from the rear of the car on wet roads. It was not very safe feeling instability. And that instability is completely gone now. The car is absolutely solid. Now, I do have new rear tires, and those certainly helped, but I'd been driving on those for over a month before I did the link arms, so I'm pretty sure it was the alignment that made the real difference. And I think I'm finally done with the suspension and I can move on to some other projects, of which I have no shortage. Don't forget the algorithm before you go, and thanks for watching.